Kyle Shanahan, he's a really great NFL head coach. Can the 49ers win a Super Bowl, though, with Kyle Shanahan, or is he in his own way? We'll get into that subject today on this edition of Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Eric_Crocker. Thanks, everybody, as always, for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And what really spurred this episode, Croc, is a video from our guy, JT O'Sullivan. I think he was in here last time we went live. Shout out to JT if he's going to pop into the live chat here, and there might be some live questions for you in this. But a really cool video, and it was all about Kyle Shanahan's San Francisco 49ers. And Croc, you and I kind of knew this was coming, and behind the scenes, we knew that his episode was going to drop on that. I was kind of waiting for it, and I was really interested in what it was going to look like because I know he was going to wear the Shanahan hat and all that.
Yeah.
It was, I mean, as usual, he nailed it. I loved the video. The just right off the bat, aesthetically, seeing him dressed up as Kyle Shanahan next to himself. And if you guys haven't watched it, when this episode's over, you got to go watch the QB School episode here. It's on YouTube. Look up the QB School, and JT O'Sullivan does a lot of great quarterback breakdowns. I always learned so much and learned a lot about the 49ers, even 4 specific plays that he talked about on the podcast as it pertains, or as on his episode, as it pertains to Kyle Shanahan and quarterback injuries and stuff. But just the beginning of the podcast, just beginning of his video, I don't call it a podcast, but the beginning of his video with him sitting there and then fake Kyle Shanahan, him dressed up as Kyle Shanahan, both on the screen at the same time, and just looking at the Kyle Shanahan one, it was really creepy but hilarious. Yeah. And I was dying laughing. I was like, at first I was like, oh, is he just not going to say anything? Because like he didn't really, the fake Kyle didn't really say anything, and it was all JT O'Sullivan talking. And I was like, oh, is he just gonna stand there and take it and not really say anything the whole time? But just seeing him sit there in the Kyle stuff, I don't know. I was just laughing. It was really funny.
He's done this. I remember a year or so ago. Matter of fact, the Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, like that draft class. Remember, he did the whole spoof where he started getting on Chris Sims.
Chris Sims, that's right.
Yeah, and that was I think that was an April 1st video as well, where a lot of people they didn't know, they didn't know who he was talking about. So he's like basically just ripping Chris Sims the entire time. And the people that watch him knew what he was saying, but anybody that didn't know and they're just watching it, they think that this is him. But he was kind of poking fun at Chris Sims on some of the things that how he critiqued some of the players and the quarterbacks and their traits.
That was an April Fool's video from him, and he did the fake quarterback rankings, right? Yeah, and that's what he did for that episode. Yeah. So that's cool. It was really fun, and I really enjoyed his video and watching him break down Kyle Shanahan, and he didn't really hold any punches back, and it wasn't, I wouldn't say criticism. I think everything in there was fair, but I didn't expect him to go as hard at Kyle Shanahan in that video. Did you?
I didn't. Well, I did, because that's just how he is, right? I mean, we kind of like talk about Kyle Shanahan and how he is, and he's very upfront. Kyle Shanahan is very blunt. I think JT O'Sullivan, he's very similar in the way that he kind of gives his content and puts it out there. It's kind of, I don't want to say matter of fact. He always leaves room for things that hey, maybe they're teaching it this way, but he's kind of a no nonsense type of guy, kind of like Shanahan. So it really worked extremely well. And then he kind of threw a curveball. I don't know if you watched like the last 45 seconds of it, but when he started talking more like how maybe this is how Kyle talks in the meetings, where he's just kind of cussing guys out, and it's really on them just doing stuff wrong. But overall, I thought the way he kind of set it all up was pretty genius. And the side-by-side thing, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and apparently I think JT O'Sullivan's brother does video stuff, so I think he's behind some of the stuff and JT's setup, and he's got a really great setup there. And a whole lot of books. Smart guy. He reads a lot of books. And so when it comes to breaking down football, he's UC Davis Aggie, so he's a smart guy.
So we got Emiliano in the chat. He says all JT had to do is say a few ums and about a dozen stuffs, and impressions could have been perfect. I told JT I said that was one of the first things, right? He said, what should I know about Kyle? Like what things that he does, and that stands out. I said you have to say I said you can't say enough. Like anytime you get a chance to say say. And he sprinkled it in there, but definitely not nearly enough.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what's funny, because we had talked a lot about the quarterback injury stuff, and I want to get into what JT said about it, but again, go watch his video after this. If you haven't seen it, I'm sure a lot of our people have seen it. I didn't think he was gonna throw the Jimmy one in there too, but that was interesting. And so basically, the real thing I took from it was, like a lot of us, and one of the big frustrations for me with Kyle was him sort of dismissing any question of him having anything to do with it, with the quarterback injuries. And it sounds like JT kind of had a problem with that as well. To be like, look, okay, you want to say you don't have anything to do with these? Well, let's break down all 4 of just those plays of them getting hurt, let alone other plays where quarterbacks might get hit in his offense. Just the 4 plays of those quarterbacks getting hurt last year with Brock Purdy, Jimmy Garoppolo, Trey Lance, and Josh Johnson in the Super Bowl. And it was pretty amazing, and especially the Jimmy one, because the Jimmy one was like, oh, Jimmy gets hurt all the time, and I was like, you can't really do anything about Jimmy Garoppolo getting hurt. But it was interesting the way he broke down the play, and that's what I love about JT O'Sullivan. And that's why I learn a lot in all of his videos, and talking about how Deebo Samuel's in the backfield in that play, and it looked like Jimmy was looking for the hot read there. There was a free rusher in his face, and so that's one of the aspects of this with Kyle Shanahan. And you can say it's not on him, but really, in the end, everything is on Kyle, good and bad, right? Kyle's in charge of everything, and really, there's not many head coaches in the NFL that have as much on their plate that are as much in charge and in control of their franchise as Kyle Shanahan. Look, the 49ers made the NFC Championship game last year. They're doing well. This is none of this, and I didn't take anything from, because some people got really mad at JT O'Sullivan, and like this criticism's not warranted. Kyle Shanahan's done a really good job. The 49ers are in a really good place. This is one of the most fun eras of 49ers football that there's been to watch and cover, minus getting to the Super Bowl. So, but Kyle Shanahan's not perfect, right? So what can Kyle Shanahan do to get there? And that's why I titled the episode, and that's why we've got to kind of answer the question, can the San Francisco 49ers win a Super Bowl with Kyle Shanahan, or is he going to get in the way enough to where they're going to be good, not a great team?
Yeah, I think the tough thing is you can look at very specific scenarios on maybe why the 49ers lost. Say, well, if Jimmy Garoppolo completes this ball for a touchdown against Kansas City, well, they probably win a Super Bowl, right? Mm-hmm. If Matt Ryan, gets the ball off a tick sooner and throws it to a wide open guy, and he doesn't get sack stripped for a fumble, return back for a touchdown, or if Mohamed Sanu, or not Sanu, if they don't get called for holding on that third down play where Sanu picked up good yard and they kick a field goal, they beat the Patriots. Like, there are all these little things in there, but ultimately I think why some of the times it looks the way it does, aside from just it being good on good when you're in the Super Bowl, right? 2 great teams. Yeah. Can Kyle kind of loosen the reins a little bit? And I loved that he called that out, because that's one of the things that we say, like Kyle, and it came out in the article years ago. A coach on his staff said that, look, we make the quarterback. The quarterback does not make the system, right? The system makes the quarterback. And I feel like anybody that has that mindset based on your players, and that's how you're going to go about it, the reins are a little tight because you want it done this way. And that's why I had said, maybe a month ago, about if the 49ers had drafted Patrick Mahomes. Would Patrick Mahomes look the way that Mahomes looks now? Because Andy Reid doesn't play Mahomes the same way that he played Alex Smith. It's much free, right? It's freer. There are much more turnover-worthy throws. Mahomes throws a ton of them, but that's part of what makes him amazing. That's part of what makes Mahomes great. You just kind of have to let him do his thing. And Andy Reid loosened up, and he has some fun, and they do the little spins and then line up and all these different things. He exudes a lot of confidence in his players. And I think part of that just letting loose a little bit you get the most out of your quarterback position. And I think there's a little bit that the 49ers, in the sense of meat being left on the bone when it comes to the quarterback position, because it has to be so dang specific, every little thing. And I think that's really tough.
Yeah, and so one of the things I've said about Kyle and is it seems like Kyle is really the one playing quarterback. And so does he really truly, because remember when he before the 2021 draft, Kyle said, I want a quarterback that's going to make something happen if I do screw up and make a bad play. I don't know if he truly wants that. I think he wants, and that's what we've seen with Jimmy Garoppolo. And that's why I wonder, I'm really interested to see what Jimmy Garoppolo looks like with the Raiders and back in that McDaniels system that he played with the New England Patriots. Right. Because one of the things, and I want to talk a little bit more about some specifics in those quarterback injuries. And then one thing that JT O'Sullivan said in that quarterback school video about Kyle Shanahan's passing game, which perked my ears up a little bit. And it wasn't a big feature of the video, but I thought it was maybe the biggest takeaway from me. We'll get into that next. Thanks, everybody, for making us your first listen every single day. Make sure you check out all the latest on the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, your team is covered no matter the sport on the network. Locked On NFL Scouting, Locked On NFL Draft. Make sure you check it all out everywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. You've heard us talk about this mobile game app. It's super fun to play. If you've ever thought you'd make a good NFL GM, well, now's your chance, and you can give it a try. It's not as easy as you might think to create that dynasty either. When you play Ultimate Football GM, you get control of every managerial aspect and everything from your team. You can sell the naming rights to your stadium if you want. You can trade any player you want. You could trade for any player you want if you pony up enough to get those players onto your team. Of course, the NFL draft, free agency, lead your team through every aspect of the offseason and the regular season to try to lead your team to glory and build that historic dynasty, hiring and firing the right coaches and coordinators, all of the negotiations of player salaries and terms, free agency, draft, player personnel, injuries, issues that pop up during a season that you might not even see coming. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Football GM, completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want to and when you want to. And Locked On 49ers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On inside the game. That is Locked On. So make sure you check it out today. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Okay, so did you come away thinking that Kyle was actually more responsible for the quarterback injuries, less responsible for the quarterback injuries, or about the same as you already felt as it pertains to Kyle Shanahan? And again, I want to say this because a lot of people are going to get mad and they hear it, and they don't want to hear any criticism at all, any analysis of their football team and their head coach that might be on the negative side of things or things that can be improved. We're sitting here talking about stuff that we want Kyle Shanahan to get over the hump so he can win that Super Bowl, so he doesn't have that cloud hanging over his head of if he can win the big one, right? And I would say one of the things that he could do to help himself get there is have a healthy quarterback. And I've said it before, and watching JT's video, I mean, it just drives home the point. It's not like the plays he's calling are crazy and out there and he's doing something wild, but it's also clear to me that protecting his quarterback is not a high priority for Kyle Shanahan.
And to answer your question, I think it's about the same, and I know that's not the fun answer there, but when you look at the plays and kind of how it happens, I think what JT ultimately did was really just shine a light on, all right, Kyle, like you act like it's just random, but here is like what you're responsible for. So I don't think it's him saying like, hey man, like you're the reason your quarterbacks get hurt, but this is what you're doing or not doing to kind of contribute to them getting hurt. So I still think it's slightly, just kind of flukish, I guess. It's weird to kind of call it fluke when so many quarterbacks are getting hurt under his watch, but there is a flukish aspect to it, but you could clearly see his role and responsibility in it.
Yeah, like if you're at the grocery store and you see a kid acting up, do you blame the kid or do you look over the parents and go, come on, man, what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's like in some way, he might be a wild kid, but in some way, the responsibility is on the parents to take care of that situation, right? And teach their kids how to behave and act right and become great adults, right? And it's hard for a quarterback to become an adult when they're getting hurt as part of their development. And it's happened to young quarterbacks, it's happened to old quarterbacks. And Kyle Shanahan's had a part in all of that, even if it's, even if the play on the play sheet, and it's another one of the things I've talked about with Kyle Shanahan is like, look, that run with Trey Lance, that's a fine play. Other teams have run it. You didn't invent it. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing out there. It's a play to run in a certain down and distance, 2nd and 8, and it's on your play sheet for a reason. It's in the playbook, and it belongs in the playbook. It should be there. It's a play that you could call, but you also have to consider, okay, the things that could happen on this play, 2nd and 8. We're supposed to be a team that's really good at running the football in the second quarter of a week 2 game, where the game's not, it's not like we're trying to come back and we really need this one play. Is it worth it to call that play then? And it's when a good play call can be a bad play call. In the Super Bowl, when, hey, you made the right pass, you made the right call, the guy got open, but the pass gets batted down. So when a good play call can be a bad play call, it's like, just run the ball, because a 0-yard run is so much better than an incomplete pass there, or a tipped interception, even worse. That could happen on that play, right? So I think a lot of times Kyle, does such a good job game planning. He's got a play on his call sheet, but sometimes a good play call can be a bad play call in some situations, especially as we saw in that JT O'Sullivan breakdown at the QB school, when the players on the field aren't ready to execute that play. That's still, even though it's a good play call, again, it's a bad play call if you haven't coached up your players on the field to execute that in a way that doesn't get the quarterback killed.
I think that's a great point there. So do we start talking about Deebo Samuel, right? And this is something that I saw Ashley pointed out on social media. She tagged myself. She tagged Greg Pinelli and said, hey, Greg was talking about this. And people kind of ripped Greg a little bit and said he was making excuses for Jimmy Garoppolo. But he was saying, hey, when your quarterback, who I think Jimmy either threw an interception or the safety jumped it and maybe dropped it. But I think it was a pick. I think the safety came down and picked it off. And Greg said, this is Deebo's fault. Like, Deebo drifted on his dig route. You're supposed to get to a certain depth and flatten that route off across, and even sometimes kind of work back down the line a little bit. And Deebo drifted up, so he kind of ran a lazy route. It allowed the safety to undercut the route and pick the ball off. And then everybody blames Jimmy G. And you see some of these things that JT pointed out with, hey, Deebo, you're supposed to be the hot here. And he's like, well, does he not know? And if he doesn't know, then whose fault is that, right? Then that's Kyle's fault for maybe not coaching it up. Or if Kyle did coach it up, then, I mean, you're allowing him to do it. And you look on the other side and you see Christian McCaffrey, who understands versus this zero blitz. Oh, I have to run it this, this certain way. And Deebo didn't understand that. And you see Jimmy waiting on Deebo to get open. And then, it's too late. Dang, now I have to try to escape. And then that's how he ultimately ended up getting hurt.
Right. And so it's either you didn't coach him up well enough, or you're putting a player who's a wide receiver at a position that's not right for him, because he doesn't have years and years of experience of being a running back. He's a wide back and he's good with the ball in his hands, but he doesn't know all the rules. And it would be hard for him to know all the rules of when the blitz pickups and all the protections, and when it's going to be hot for you in that spot, because you're not used to playing running back, you're used to playing wide receiver, and how the rules would be different maybe for you. So that's really tough. And in the end, it all works its way back up to the top of the pyramid, which is Kyle Shanahan. And the other thing about quarterback is it all works its way up to the top with Kyle Shanahan. How has he not found himself a quarterback that we're still here getting ready for year 7 of Kyle Shanahan's tenure with the San Francisco 49ers, and still have really no answers of who the quarterback is? That's a failure. And Kyle Shanahan needs to figure out quarterback. And when they figure out the quarterback, need to keep that guy healthy and on the field to win that Super Bowl. And I absolutely think Kyle Shanahan can go win a Super Bowl. I mean, I don't think that's even a question. He's a really good coach, but I think there are ways that he can improve. And I think a lot of it does revolve around the quarterback.
Right. I mean, I think that's everybody. I started one of the comments in the chat, and Judd said, it's easy to loosen up when you have Mahomes. Why didn't Andy loosen up with Alex Smith? And I think he did. I think he did loosen up with Alex Smith, right? Like that's part of it. It's easy to loosen up when you see what Mahomes has become. But prior to Mahomes becoming Mahomes, how hard is it to loosen up for a guy who played this kind of reckless style in college? And I remember thinking maybe needs to tighten up a little bit, but man, supremely talented. And clearly, Andy Reid just said, no, man, go do your thing. Go do your thing and just play like how you play. And that's hard to have that type of trust in the guy. And I think for Kyle and the offense and the passing offense, and that was another thing that JT pointed out as well, that it's this it's not the most like dynamic in the sense of like, or easy throws. And we've talked about this, right? Like, hey man, why don't you, like, where's the 5-yard stop route or 10-yard stop route, right? Like just kind of like easy throws. A lot of things is really predicated on timing and rhythm, which makes it great. And when it hits, it hits. But I do think it's a little bit more difficult in the sense of quarterbacking in this offense. I think it's the easiest and hardest. It's the easiest because it's clear, defined reads on where to throw the ball. It's the hardest because the timing and accuracy and anticipation have to be on point so much, as opposed to some of these other offenses where they spread it out, is wide open, oh boom, ball's out of your hand, and it's a little bit clearer vision. Like you think about all the throws that Jimmy Garoppolo's throwing, a lot of them really tight windows, and you have to be able to make that throw. It's a little bit more difficult and really predicated on the timing, which again, great, but it's a little hard.
Next, I want to get into that other aspect of the JT O'Sullivan QB school video on Kyle Shanahan. It was about the passing game. Is there more there in Kyle Shanahan's passing game? Does there need to be more there in Kyle Shanahan's passing game and an evolution of it? And George Kittle, a little WWE action as well. We'll get into the chat a little bit to finish this one up next. Thank you once again, everybody, for making us your first listen. Check out Locked On NFL Scouting for your second listen with the Draft Dudes. From free agency to the draft, salary cap management, and more, NFL experts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino take you through what it's like to build a successful NFL franchise Monday through Friday. Find it on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Croc. So JT at the end of the video threw in something about Kyle Shanahan's passing game, and I was a little bit surprised to hear that one, and it perked my ears up a little bit. And essentially, he talked about how maybe Kyle Shanahan needs to evolve a little bit in his passing game for being like this genius and this guru. Maybe that passing game could advance a little bit. And again, it might be about the quarterback too and limitations there. But and I think there's something we've talked about in the past is like, where are we lighting up the scoreboard here? You know, and we saw a little bit with Brock Purdy there at the end of the season, and maybe that's the next evolution of it. But there's got to be more to Kyle Shanahan's passing game too, because it's weird to have this offensive guru of a head coach, and the offenses are good, but the defenses are better than the offenses. What is the offense going to be like? Oh, this is the show now.
Well, I think we saw some of that with Purdy late last year, right? I mean, the team was putting up a lot of points with Purdy at quarterback. But again, my guy Greg, we got to get Greg on here to talk about this. And he talked about some of the concepts in the passing game and how kind of sometimes they're very simplistic. And JT kind of pointed that out as well. It's the drop back passing game. That's where the issue is, right? Like, again, the under center play action, we see those windows open up. But when you are in shotgun and it's spread out, you know, we're just the gimme throws, the simple throws, the high level efficiency throws in this offense. I think from a drop back passing perspective, I think that's where the 49ers can improve in their passing game.
I think Deebo Samuel is going to be part of that. Taking it more, I don't want to take it more seriously, but Deebo could be a better receiver than he is right now, I think. Brandon,
yeah.
And if you're going to get that quarterback play that we saw from Brock Purdy, or potentially better from Trey Lance if he wins the job, right? Like, there's so much more there in the passing game. The running game's so good, and the defense is so good. I mean, the 49ers could be scary good, ridiculously good, even without a Mahomes level quarterback. There's a lot more there, I think, in the 49ers drop back passing game that could come, and it could come this year.
What I think with Deebo Samuel, I think he got a little caught up in the wide back and kind of what that is, and he embraced it, and that's great. He does a great job in that role, but I think it did take a little bit away from what he can potentially be as a pass catcher. And you know, I talked about it before when he made the comment. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but it always stuck with me when they asked him, "Do you watch any other receivers?" And he said, "No. Why would I watch any other receivers when none of them are like me? They don't play like me. They don't do what I do." And I'm like, well, you do different things half the time, but what about the other half the time where you're actually just a receiver, like a normal guy out running routes? And I think that you can always improve your game. And when you hear, Devontae Adams or you hear Cooper Kupp, like, why are they taking things from other people's games and kind of adding that to their repertoire? Oh man, I saw him kind of do this, and okay, I worked on this, and I'm improving at that. So it's like everybody else can work on these little things, but Deebo Samuel, great at what you do, but you can't continue to evolve as a pure pass catcher. I think that's a little interesting, and I think it puts Kyle Shanahan in a sticky situation because on any given play, Deebo can beat man coverage. He can get open, he can catch the ball, and he can take it to the crib. But as a coach, can you 100% count on him to win the rep? And I think that's something that is just a little hit and miss with his kind of inability more times than not to create the separation. Now, again, he only needs a slither of space, but even then, it makes it, again, a little bit tougher of a target for a quarterback.
I don't even know how to say this name. RLB2ESQ in the chat says, Peacock, yep, failing at QB, didn't even scout Mahomes. He gets a pass because of nepotism. So nepotism was a big subject of JT O'Sullivan's video. And I talked a little bit about that before here on the podcast. And look, the biggest thing with that, look, Croc, you know what it's been like as a player, and you've had interviews for other positions with NFL teams, right? I a long time ago, I tried to get my foot in the door, scouting, whatever. I was like, dude, let me mop the floors in the scouting room, whatever. It is so hard to get a job in the NFL, and to roll out of college and get to be quality control for John Gruden. Kyle Shanahan was put on the fast track. Would he have eventually gotten to where he is right now, being an NFL head coach? Does he deserve to be an NFL head coach? Is he a good NFL head coach? Yeah. But the nepotism in the NFL is crazy, and it's called the Nepotism Football League for a reason. And I will say that Kyle is not going to turn down those jobs either, right, that he got. But I do love that the 49ers have been ahead of everybody in getting minorities hired elsewhere and getting other people for the top jobs. But I still think there's a problem at the bottom level, at the entry level jobs, because it is so hard to get that. And you got every Kubiak in the world working in the NFL, right, including on the San Francisco 49ers staff. And it's all family, the Shanahans, the Kubiaks, they worked together before. Now they have jobs here together. So there's still a lot of that going on in the NFL. And it's the entry-level jobs that are the hardest to get in the NFL. Once you get the foot in the door and you show what you can do, then you can earn yourself some other positions. But teams aren't trying to get the best people either. We talked about, like, why do teams miss so much in the draft? Why? I don't think they're trying to get the best scouting staff. They're just trying to find some people that'll work for cheap that know somebody else. Like, hey, who do you know? Cool, bring him in. Let's get him hired. And it's still not a great situation. It can be better. And a lot of people ask, okay, why would JT O'Sullivan bring that up? You got to shine light on it. You got to talk about it. You got to bring it up. And hopefully we can continue to prove and continue to get better. But, nepotism is never going to go away. And it's definitely not just an NFL problem either.
It isn't. And I remember during the Senior Bowl week, right? I'm at the Senior Bowl for Mobile, and I'm in this bar, and you just see all these people, right? Everybody, front office, you got coaches in there. It's like, man, I'm right next to Vrabel. I'm right next to Brian Flores. But the one interesting thing from scouts and things like that, there are not many brothers out there. And when I walk out into the bar and I see everybody there that's involved with these different teams, and you see their logos and everything, and I'm like, man, very few brothers. For as many people as I know that try to get into it, that really give a lot of time and effort. I mean, look, we got great guys on the draft show right now, but a lot of guys that they're trying and they're trying to figure out different ways to get in. But when you look, and you go to a place like that and you see 90% of the people don't look like me. And it's just interesting for as many people that are interested in trying to get into it. Like I said, it is extremely difficult.
Yeah, and when you're looking at players, it's a meritocracy. You find a great player, you're trying to bring them into the organization. They're not trying to do that with their front office. And so I think a team could get really ahead. And I've said this before, and I did the Shadow 49ers for a long time, and I kind of retired that, 2 drafts ago now. And I'm super confident. I'm not saying this to brag, or I'm not saying this to be like anything crazy that I don't fully believe. Croc, you and I, GM, assistant GM, we go hire nobody from the league. We go hire Keith and Dame from Locked On NFL Draft, Kyle and Joe from Locked On NFL Scouting, Ben Solak, right? Was, I think, a boy wonder. Dude's only 25 years old. He is so smart. All these guys from the media, people we've worked with on the network, people we've worked with. I could build a staff. And look, dude, Brad Spielberger, he's been on the show over the cap. He'll be our cap expert guy, right? We could put together
our Parag Marate.
Yeah, our Parag. Yeah, we could put together. I'm not joking. We could put together a front office staff that would be not only just good enough, not 32nd in the league, 31st in the league, top 16, top half of the NFL in putting together a football team. No doubt in my mind. They're not looking for smart people. That's not the number one goal of filling out the bottom of your coaching staff and the bottom of your front office and your scouting staff. It's not the goal in the NFL right now.
Right.
Hiring easy hires, people who do you know? That's getting your foot in the door is the biggest problem in the NFL, non-player version.
So we have Greg right here in the chat. He says, Brian and Eric, do you think it's because of racism or something else? And I don't think it's because of racism. I think it's just hiring people that or this person knows this person, and then eventually everybody kind of looks the same because, I know this guy. And I think that's how it happens. I don't think it's like, oh, man, we're just going to exclude this guy because he's black. I don't think that's happening at all. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know. But that's not what I think is going on. I think it's just people hiring people that they know and that they're comfortable with, and they bring them on at entry-level positions, and those guys work really hard and work their way up.
Yeah, and there's no pipeline like there is for being a player, of finding the guys and scouting the players. There's not people out there scouting the scouts and trying to find the next great NFL scout and trying to find the next great, I would say they are looking a little bit at the analytics guys. You always hear about, so-and-so just like they'll hire some kid from, MIT to be in an NFL front office, but so they're kind of looking, but it's just, there's not the pipeline and not the focus and not the money put on it. A scout makes, they used to call, I don't know what scouts make now, but they used to call it 25 and 25. They're just looking for a 25-year-old that somebody knows, somebody's nephew, somebody's other friend that's already on the scouting staff. Somebody's 25 years old, doesn't have family, that'll work for $25,000 a year and travel around and have a terrible life around the country doing the scouting in their region. 25 years old, 25,000, 25 for 25. And that was the extent of what they put into finding a scout. And those scouts, that's why it's, I just think that's why there's a lot of mistakes made. It's a hard thing to do anyway. But anyway, back to the nepotism point. Yeah, I think it's more just helping out who you know than it is a race thing.
Right. And they do things that help. They have the Bill Walsh thing. I mean, that's more so for coaching. But I think they have something along the lines of that to bring in more diversity with scouts as well. I believe they have something along those lines. So there are things that they're trying to put in place to help create a little bit more, diversity in the NFL.
Todd says, Peacock looking to be the GM of the next expansion franchise. I swear to God, me and Croc, give us a franchise. We will not let you down. We will not.
Look at the people that are former GMs or former scouts, and just look at how they talk, right? Like, you see them on social media, and look at how they talk and how wrong they are or how right. And I'd say we can, you talked about some people on the Locked On Network that, we know football, et cetera. We could take some of the people in the chat right now. I guarantee, like a bunch of y'all, and you guys would hit on some players as well. I mean, it's just, I don't think it's as drastic of a difference as people think. The biggest thing really is, it's not even so much the talent part. It's understanding who the player is. Everybody in here, we got Alex Purcell in the chat. Alex could tell us what talent looks like, right?
Oh, dude, we got a listenership that knows ball, Croc.
Right, that too.
That's why they listen to this podcast, because they know ball.
Right.
Did you catch?
Knowing ball, I was going to ask you, did you watch the college basketball, the national championship, the girls?
No, I've seen all over social media with the "you can't see me" thing. But
so there's trash talking going on, right? And people are like, "Oh man, classless, all this," and I'm like, "How much of y'all like played sports?" Because that is as okay. She followed her around, whatever. It is way worse. Whatever that was, whatever people think that was, it's way worse. Way worse on the football field. Not even close.
Or even dude, go to your local YMCA and listen to people who play a lot of ball together, talk to each other. But they say some crazy stuff, dude, especially when the game's on the line. Here we go. We got JT in the chat. JT O'Sullivan says, I'd hit on a few. Don't sign me up, though. JT will be definitely on my staff. And I don't care if you want to or not, JT. You'd be on my staff for sure. It'd be a superstar staff, no doubt.
No doubt.
Appreciate the video, too. I love the stuff, JT. Keep it coming.
Yeah.
Did you catch George Kittle at WrestleMania?
I did. Hey, I always tell people, man, talented people, they can do anything. Jake Paul, like Jake Paul and the Paul brothers, they're really big on YouTube. They do the boxing and things like that, but they are very talented, right? So one of them, I think is Jake. I don't know if you've seen him wrestle. Looks amazing. Like, he looks like a wrestler. Like, it looked great. And I'm just like, well, of course, he's hella talented. George Kittle, hella talented. Of course, George Kittle looks natural, doing some acting and some wrestling. And that's right up his wheelhouse. I remember him coming into the league when he was drafted and talking about how big of a fan of wrestling that he is. And seeing him up there with The Miz. And I remember Miz when he was on the real world, not even wrestling yet, but he was trying to get his foot in the door with wrestling. But George Kittle, of course, I mean, look like he's a natural, a great actor. I think it fits right up, what his character is, even as a 49er.
Well, all of those people you just named, I mean, they were headlining, or not really headlining, but they were a big part of that show, that WWE show. The Miz came from like reality TV.
Yeah, right? the real world.
Yeah, and Jake Paul came from the the YouTube world, and George Kittle comes from the NFL. Pat McAfee comes from the NFL. McAfee, by the way, with the flip off the top rope, I wasn't expecting
crazy.
That. He doesn't look as nice as George Kittle does, in the sleeveless in the ring. And George Kittle just looks the part. When George Kittle retires, he could easily have a full career WWE. Right. Like, he loves it. He eats it up. I'm not into the wrestling thing like I was when I was a kid. Like I'm talking like Ultimate Warrior.
Well, did you think it was real?
Oh, when I was a kid, yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Well, I thought it was real. So
the truth about whether it was real, even when I was starting to realize it's not real, right? And he would not want. He was like a Santa Claus thing. He didn't want to tell me until I realized like, this crap ain't real. But then it was like basically the jorts era is when I stopped. It was like Stone Cold Steve Austin and John Cena. And they're wearing jorts and they just have a name. And I'm like, I don't want to see Bob Jefferson. I want to see Jimmy Superfly Snuka. I want to see like characters. And plus, I was a kid and I had that suspension of disbelief, which I don't have anymore. Like I was watching Kittle. And it was really cool to see him do it. But I was watching now. I was like, are people sold on this? Like it doesn't work for me anymore.
I think it's more so, and somebody kind of made the connection between just watching a TV show. And it's tough because growing up, you did think it was real. Like when it was like a big match and it's The Rock versus Stone Cold. Like, I do not want to think that this is fake. And so I always thought it was real. But now that you know it's fake, it's like, okay, I do want to try to view it as acting, but I just can't because I always thought it was real. It's like I don't get excited about Santa anymore. I see him in the mall. I was like, he's fake. That's my cousin or something.
Are you surprised that Kittle's allowed to do it? Because he didn't do a lot. Like, he didn't do the flip off the top rope or anything, so it wasn't really super physical with what he did. But I remember back the story of Matt Cain threw a perfect game, and he tells that story. And before the game, there was like some PJ golfers, I think, were there, and he had to ask the GM of the Giants, Brian Sabian, he had to ask permission to hit a golf ball from home plate before the game. Like, you can't do anything without permission in sports. Like, I can't imagine going and performing in WWE is part of George Kittle's contract. If he was to like jump over that rail and turn his ankle and get hurt, you know what I mean? Like, I bet he could avoid all kinds of stuff in that contract. Like, that was pretty wild that he was even there and allowed to do what he did. Although he didn't do a ton of stuff, but I'd be really interesting to know about the contract and what he's allowed to do, what permission he got for that kind of thing. Because I can't imagine if I'm the GM and I've got a multi-million-dollar athlete and I see him doing WWF stuff, I'd be like, dude, you better go sit down. That's what I'd be thinking if I was John Lynch.
Yeah, I think they knew, and maybe he said, look, I'm not gonna be doing much. I'm just gonna do a little clothesline on the Miz, and then my guy Pat McAfee's gonna come off the top rope. I won't be near him. And they probably said, go ahead, live out your dream, dude. Go live out your dream. He was ready, man. He had the wife next to him. She's like rooting him on. I was like, that's pretty cool.
You could tell he loved it. He was eating it up. It's fantastic. I love it for George. And he did a good job. Shout out to George. Yeah, he killed it. Last question here. Peacock and Croc, if you were GM, would you trade Lance before or during the draft? Why or why not? Larry Kruger seems to want to. I did see some tweets from Larry. I don't think he said he wanted to. I think he said that he thought it sounded like the 49ers were going to, that they were setting it up that way. It feels like they'd be willing to trade him for the right offer, and I don't know if they'll get that offer. That's the vibe I get right now. Would I do it? I would for sure trade. You just can't know what he is yet. And there's that not knowing that would always bother me. Right. And if
you're gonna know when you see him on another team.
Right. And that's the thing, is like, so what are you getting? Right. I've always talked about the Colts with Trey Lance, that second round pick, number 35 overall. That feels about what the right compensation would be. But if Rand Carthon is like, hey, dude, here's the number 11 pick in the draft. I run the Tennessee Titans now. Here's pick 11. Give me Trey Lance. You kind of have to take it.
Kinda.
But hold on. But Rand Carthon saw Trey Lance every day in practice. If he's willing to give up the number 11 pick, that's the indicator that you probably don't want to give him up. Because if Trey Lance hits, that's way better than anything we saw from Brock Purdy. If he's that dude.
But again, I don't think it matters. I think Kyle likes how he wants his guy to play quarterback. I think Brock Purdy does that very well. And it's a match made in heaven, and you kind of roll with that. So if you can salvage the Lance situation for a player that maybe doesn't do things specifically exactly how you want him to, and there needs to be some growth there, go ahead and move him for the 35th pick, 11th pick, whatever it is. So I'd take a third, and just move forward with you got Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy.
Yeah,
and Trey gets a fresh start somewhere.
I'm with Larry. It sounds like 49ers would trade him. And if you've already decided that the leader in the clubhouse is Brock Purdy and you're just waiting for him to get healthy, well, he's going to be healthy at some point, most likely. Does that mean you have to wait until after the draft, until after that 3-month point when Purdy, has a checkup and starts to throw, and then you really know what his rehab is going to look like? You have to wait. Is Sam Darnold the buffer there where you don't even have to wait because you like Darnold enough until Purdy is ready? But if you really think Purdy's going to be the guy, then you got to take a good offer if it's there. And I feel like that's where the 49ers are. But at the same time, if I had to put money right now, I would say Trey Lance, Croc. I would bet that he's the week 1 starter right now. And it might not be better than 50% chance, but with Darnold in the mix and then Purdy when he comes back, I still feel like the most likely scenario is Trey Lance is starting in week 1.
Yeah. I would say that's most likely. We got Frank here. He says, in camp, the whispers about Mahomes were sparkling immediately. And I would say, no, at least not the year he was supposed to be starting, right? Did we go back and did you see those? Because I remember reading it.
I totally forgot about that. You wanted me to watch a certain game, right?
No, not a game. But, Well, I did say if you go back and watch the preseason game, 49ers versus Chiefs. And yeah, it was like first preseason game. Tyler Bray playing that game. I think he was actually the number 2 guy for Kansas City. Then Mahomes came in. If you would have said, oh man, CJ Beathard looked better than Mahomes, I'd say, yeah, you're probably right. So like it didn't look crazy. But the next year when he was going to be the starter, there were a lot of, they were kind of scared. He was throwing a bunch of interceptions and it was like, oh, Mahomes struggles again in practice. Mahomes struggles again. Like it wasn't all, sparkling. Now they come back and say maybe there are some sparkling throws, but if you go and look at the write-ups from those early practices, it wasn't what I think people think.
It's wild, man. And clearly Mahomes is the type of guy who's just a baller and you get him on the field. And I bet he's one of those like Kittle. I bet if you went and played basketball, you'd be like, dang, Mahomes is a really good basketball player. Right. I didn't really expect that. His dad was a Major League Baseball player, so I bet he can hit. I bet he's got a crazy arm. I bet he's a good pitcher. I bet he can play. I bet he can pick it at shortstop. You know what I mean? Better than you might expect. Like
athletes are athletic. Who would have thought?
It's just like when you see Croc mess around on the basketball court. The jumper's clean. Throw down if he needs to. Right? My
release is a little. I can work on it's very quick, but it's a little short. It's not short like Sean Marion, but it's in between Sean Marion and like a regular jumper.
Okay.
Got to work on that.
I get it.
And I can't dunk anymore, so it kind of takes a little bit of that.
What?
I don't think I can. Maybe I can. I don't know. I haven't
You're
tried.
only like 187 pounds. I bet you can get that weight off the ground now. Have you tried recently?
I'm 197 right now.
Okay.
But yeah, a few more pounds. You know.
I bet you can, dude. You've been doing leg day and you're down a few lbs.
Oh yeah, a lot. I mean, I think overall like 20 pounds.
I haven't dunked since my 30th birthday. I'd hurt myself if I tried. Those days are definitely over.
Yeah.
Sad. It's a sad time. All right. Thanks everybody for making a Peacock said Peacock and Williamson. Dude, make sure you subscribed up to Peacock and Williamson, please. The brand new YouTube channel there. We're talking about the entire NFL every single day. Former NFL scout Matt Williamson and myself. And of course, thanks for making Locked On 49ers your first listen every single day. Croc and I back tomorrow right here, Locked On 49ers.